I watch them through the security cameras, standing at my mansion's gates with their expensive luggage now worn and scuffed. Mother's perfect hair isn't so perfect anymore, and Father's proud shoulders are slumped. It's raining, and they don't even have an umbrella. 10 years ago, they would have never been caught in the rain. They would have called their driver. But their driver, like everything else, is gone now. My finger hovers over the intercom button as memories flood back. I can still feel the cold metal against my wrists, hear the soft clink of chains whenever I shifted position. Your scars scare people, sweetie. It's for the best. Mother's voice, always so gentle when she'd lock me up, like she was doing me a favor. The basement radiator became my best friend during their fancy dinner parties, my only companion as their laughter filtered down through the floorboards. I was 8 when it happened, the fire that changed everything. I can still smell the smoke, feel the heat on my skin as I ran into my little sister Emma's room. She was only 4, clutching her favorite teddy bear and crying in the corner. I didn't think twice before wrapping her in a wet blanket and carrying her out. The doctors called me a hero. The newspapers printed my picture. For 2 weeks, I was their brave, beautiful daughter. Then the bandages came off. That's when I learned that heroes aren't supposed to have scars. At first, it was just subtle things. Mother would dress Emma in pretty party dresses while I got comfortable clothes that covered everything. During family photos, they'd position me in the back, half hidden behind Emma. They'd say, "The light isn't good for your sensitive skin, darling," but I saw them wincing when they looked at my face, my arms, my hands. The first dinner party after my recovery, I came downstairs in a new dress I'd picked out myself. Mother dropped her wine glass. The red liquid spread across their precious Persian carpet like blood. "Go to your room," she whispered, her eyes darting between me and their arriving guests. "Please, sweetie. We'll talk about this later." Later never came. Instead, the locks appeared on my door. First, it was just during parties. Then, it was whenever anyone might stop by. "It's temporary," Father would assure me, sliding books and puzzles under the door, "until you heal completely." But we all knew the scars were permanent. I sit in my security room now, watching them get soaked in the rain. The mansion they once proudly owned, where they once locked away their imperfect daughter, now stands as a fortress against them. Every camera, every lock, every security measure is poetic justice. Protection against the people I once needed protection from. Emma calls every day, leaving tearful messages about family and forgiveness. She was too young to understand then, and by the time she was old enough, she'd been trained to look away. It's for her own good, they'd told her. People wouldn't understand. Now she wants to understand, but some things can't be undone. The rain is getting heavier. Mother's makeup is running down her face, and Father's keeping his distance from her like he always does when she's less than perfect. My finger still hovers over the intercom button. One press, and I could speak to them. One code entered, and those gates would swing open. Instead, I pick up my phone and send a text to their hotel. "I'm sorry, but I'm away at boarding school in Switzerland. Perhaps we can connect another time." After all, that's what they always told their friends about my absence. It seems only fitting they finally experience what it feels like to be locked out, to be the ones people whisper about, to be the imperfect ones no one wants to see. I lean back in my chair, absently running my fingers over the scars on my wrist, not from the fire, but from years of being chained to a radiator. The security monitors show them finally turning away, dragging their luggage through puddles, headed back to whatever cheap hotel they can still afford. I feel nothing but a calm certainty that some doors are better left closed. The memories come easier now, like water breaking through a cracked dam. That first year after the fire was a slow descent into isolation, each day bringing a new protection they claimed was for my benefit. I remember sitting on my bed, watching Emma twirl in her new ballet outfit, Mother cooing over how graceful she looked. When I asked about joining dance classes too, Mother's face did that thing. That pinched look she'd get whenever I reminded her I existed beyond my closed door. "The studio lights would be harsh on your sensitive skin, darling," she said, smoothing Emma's tutu. "Besides, you have your books. You've always loved your books." She wasn't wrong. I did love my books. They became my only friends as my world grew smaller and smaller. Each time I heard Emma's friends coming over for playdates, their laughter echoing through the halls, I'd bury myself deeper in stories about people who got to live real lives. I was 10 when they first used the chain. It was during their annual Christmas party, the biggest event of their social calendar. I'd been getting braver, sneaking downstairs after bedtime to watch the glamorous guests through the banister rails. That night, I'd planned to show them I could be normal. I'd practiced smiling without pulling my scars too tight, had worn a high-necked dress that hid the worst of the marks. "This will hurt me more than it hurts you," Father said, clicking the padlock into place around my wrist. The radiator pipe was cold against my back and the chain was heavy, not long enough to let me lie down properly. "It's just for a few hours. We can't risk you wandering down and—" Surprising anyone, he left a blanket, a bottle of water, and my favorite book, like that made it okay. Like reading The Secret Garden while chained up was somehow normal. Mother found their solution elegant in its simplicity. The basement radiator was far enough from the party noise that no one would hear me, but close enough that they could check on me between greeting guests. "Think of it as your special quiet time," she'd say, bringing down plates of party food like it was a picnic and not a prison. Other children would love to have time to themselves like this. Emma caught them once, early on. She stood at the basement door, her eyes wide as Father secured the lock. "Is Sarah being punished?" she asked in her small voice. Mother swooped in, steering her away with practiced grace. "No, sweetie. Sarah just needs extra care, like a delicate flower in a greenhouse. Now, why don't you show everyone your new dance routine?" The chains became routine for any gathering. Dinner parties, bridge club meetings, even when Emma's friends came over. My world shrank to the basement's dimensions, marked by the chain's reach. I memorized every crack in the concrete floor, every water stain on the walls. During the day, I was allowed upstairs but never outside. "Your skin condition," they'd explain to anyone who asked. "Very sensitive to sunlight." I learned to track time by the sounds above. Coffee groups at 10 a.m., Emma's piano lessons at 3 p.m., Father's business associates arriving for drinks at 6 p.m. Each sound meant another few hours by the radiator, another evening of pressing my hands against my ears to drown out the sound of people living normal lives just above my head. The hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort. It was watching Emma grow up through glimpses and fragments. Hearing about her first school dance while I sat homeschooled in my room. Seeing her prom photos while I calculated compound interest rates on my secret laptop. She grew into everything they wanted, their perfect daughter who never made guests uncomfortable, who never had to be hidden away. But in all those hours alone, I was growing too, just not in the way they expected. Every chain link taught me patience. Every lie about boarding school taught me the value of truth. Every party I spent in the basement taught me about investment opportunities and compound interest as I listened to Father's drunk business friends discuss stocks and trades above my head. They thought they were burying me. They didn't realize they were planting a seed. By 12, I had mastered the art of silence. I knew exactly how to move to prevent the chains from rattling, how to time my bathroom requests between party courses, how to cry without making a sound. Mother had redecorated the basement to ease her guilt. Plush carpet around the radiator, a comfortable reading chair just within the chain's reach, even some tasteful artwork on the walls. "See? It's like your own little apartment," she'd say, arranging fresh flowers in a vase I couldn't reach. The flowers would die, and no one would replace them until the next party. The lies grew more elaborate as I grew older. I existed in two versions, the hidden daughter in the basement and the brilliant student abroad. Mother would write fictional letters from Switzerland and read them at her tea parties. "Sarah's French is coming along beautifully," she'd gush, while I sat chained below, teaching myself French from secondhand textbooks. "The mountain air is doing wonders for her condition." Sometimes I wondered if she'd told the lie so many times she'd started to believe it. Emma's friends were the worst part. They'd come over for sleepovers, their voices carrying through the vents. "I didn't know you had a sister," they'd say. "Oh, she's in Europe," Emma would reply, the lie now automatic on her tongue. "Some special medical school." I'd listen to them giggle about boys, about school, about normal teenage things, while I picked at the scabs the chains left on my wrists. One time, a curious friend ventured toward the basement door. I heard Emma's panic, her quick diversion. "Oh, we don't go down there. Black mold problem." I started marking the days on the wall behind the radiator, hidden where the cleaning lady wouldn't see. Not counting down to freedom, I had no illusion of that, but counting up, recording my time in captivity like a prisoner of war. Each mark represented a day of teaching myself something new. I learned to pick locks with paper clips stolen from Father's office, though I never used this skill. Where would I go with my scarred face and stunted social skills? Instead, I practiced on old padlocks, preparing for a future I couldn't yet imagine. The internet became my window to the world through Dad's discarded laptop. While they hosted charity galas upstairs, believing me safely chained, I learned about stocks, cryptocurrency, and corporate law. I read about similar cases, children hidden away by ashamed families, but those stories always ended in dramatic rescues or tragic deaths. My story would be different. I would write my own ending. One night, during a particularly loud dinner party, I heard Father discussing his company's latest acquisition. Through the heating vents, his voice carried clearly. "The SEC won't look too closely if we bury the numbers in subsidiary reports." That was the night I started recording everything on my rebuilt phone. Every conversation, every illegal deal, every lie about their missing daughter, all carefully documented and encrypted, waiting for the right moment. Emma grew more distant as she got older, but I saw the guilt in her eyes when she'd bring me food during parties. "I'm sorry," she'd whisper, not meeting my gaze. "They say it's for your own good." She'd leave quickly, running back to her perfect life, leaving me with cooling food and the weight of her pity. I didn't blame her anymore. She was as much their creation as I was, just shaped by praise instead of chains. The irony wasn't lost on me when Father installed a state-of-the-art security system to protect the family. Every camera he added, every security code he programmed, I learned to hack and repurpose. Their fortress was becoming my arsenal, one keystroke at a time. They thought they were locking me away from the world, but instead, they were teaching me exactly how to bring their world crashing down. Life settled into a routine of calculated survival. During quiet times, I was the ghost who drifted through the house's upper floors, always careful to avoid windows or unexpected visitors. When guests came, I became the secret in the basement, chained but never broken. Mother had developed an efficient system. A quick text would warn me of impending visitors, giving me time to walk calmly to my spot before Father came down with the chains. They'd perfected their routine too, making my imprisonment feel almost normal. Their basement renovations continued, each improvement a band-aid on their conscience. A small bathroom was installed within the chain's reach. "So you won't have to wait," Mother said, as if this made it better. A mini fridge appeared, stocked with snacks and drinks. Father even mounted a television on the wall, though the sound of their parties still drowned out any program I tried to watch. They were building me a comfortable prison, but it was a prison nonetheless. I started noticing changes in Emma during her junior year of high school. She'd sneak down more often, bringing me gossip and remnants of her normal life. "I told Lily I have a sister today," she confessed one evening, picking at her perfectly manicured nails. "But then Mom found out and—" I had to say I was talking about my cousin. Her voice cracked. "Sarah, sometimes I dream about just telling everyone, about the chains, the lies, everything." But we both knew she wouldn't. She was too deeply invested in the perfect family story. The day Emma got her college acceptance letters was when I saw the full depth of our parents' twisted love. 5 thick envelopes arrived, all from top schools. Mother and Father threw a massive celebration. Our brilliant daughter following in her father's footsteps. They invited what felt like the entire town. I spent that party not by my usual radiator, but crouched in the tiny basement bathroom, chain-fed under the door because there were too many guests using the upstairs bathrooms. Through the vents, I heard Father's tipsy speech about family legacy and Mother's proud sobs. That night changed something in me. As I listened to them praise Emma's bright future, I made my first real investment. Using skills learned from years of eavesdropping on Father's business calls, I created a ghost account and bought shares in a small tech company one of his drunk colleagues had mentioned. It wasn't much, just some money saved from birthday cards that still came from distant relatives who believed the boarding school lie. But it was a start. The cleaning lady, Maria, became my unwitting ally. She'd leave her phone unattended while cleaning, letting me use its signal to check my investments since the basement Wi-Fi was spotty. She never knew about the chains. They had her clean the basement on different days, but she'd talk to me sometimes, probably pitying the scarred girl who never left the house. "Mi niña," she'd say, leaving extra snacks hidden where my parents wouldn't find them. "You are too pale. You need sun." If she noticed the marks on my wrists, she never mentioned them. The hardest part was maintaining sanity when they'd host multi-day events. During their annual holiday parties, I could spend up to 72 hours chained up. I survived by turning my prison into a classroom, teaching myself everything I could about their world: finance, law, social dynamics. I learned that money was their true language, that status was their religion, and that image was worth more to them than their own daughter's freedom. Every lesson they taught upstairs about power and privilege, I absorbed and reimagined from my spot by the radiator. I started documenting everything meticulously. Every party, every lie told about my whereabouts, every business deal discussed too loudly. Not for revenge, at least that's what I told myself, but for protection. Knowledge became my currency, information my escape route. While they thought they were protecting their reputation by hiding me, they were actually giving me the keys to their destruction. I just had to wait for the right moment to use them. The laptop became my lifeline, my gateway to freedom. Father had tossed it aside after a minor hardware issue, never suspecting I'd learned to repair it from YouTube tutorials played on Emma's discarded phone. During their lavish parties, while they thought I was quietly reading by the radiator, I was actually building my escape, one line of code at a time. I learned Python first, then JavaScript, teaching myself to create trading algorithms that could work while I was chained up. Their basement prison had given me something they never intended: time. Endless, uninterrupted hours to learn, to plan, to grow stronger. While Emma was busy with soccer practice and student council, I was discovering their company's financial weaknesses. Father's drunk business conversations became my Harvard Business School, every slurred word about offshore accounts and hidden assets carefully stored in my memory. I started small, testing my algorithms with penny stocks. The first time I made $100, I almost cried. It wasn't about the money. We had plenty of that, even if I could only access the small account they maintained for appearance's sake. It was about proving I could create something from nothing, build wealth from within my chains. Each successful trade felt like a key turning in a lock. The real breakthrough came during one of their wine society meetings. Father had forgotten to check if his Bluetooth was connected to the basement speakers, a system he'd installed so I could enjoy their parties from a safe distance. Instead of classical music, I heard him clearly discussing a major corporate merger. "The paperwork goes through next week," he slurred to his equally drunk friends. "Stock's gonna skyrocket." I invested every penny I had access to. When the stock tripled, I knew I'd found my way out. Emma's graduation party was when I started phase 2 of my plan. They'd chained me up early that day, expecting a huge crowd. Mother had been especially nervous. Important college friends would be there, potential business connections for Emma's future. "Please be extra quiet today, sweetheart," she'd said, checking the chains twice. "Emma needs everything to be perfect." I smiled and nodded, already executing trades on my hidden phone, using everything I'd overheard about Father's company's vulnerabilities. I created a network of anonymous accounts, each one backed by untraceable cryptocurrency. Every time they chained me up, I used those hours to build my financial fortress. Their parties became my office hours. The longer they kept me down there, the more I learned, the more I earned. The radiator that was meant to be my prison became the foundation of my empire. The security cameras they installed to protect their perfect world became my eyes and ears. I learned to hack into the system during those long nights alone, watching their world from every angle. I saw how Father touched his secretary when he thought no one was looking, how Mother poured vodka into her tea during morning gossip sessions, Every secret they thought was safe became mine to keep. One night, I heard Emma crying in her room through the camera feed. She was on the phone with her best friend. "I can't keep lying about her," she sobbed. "Every time someone asks about my sister, I feel sick, but Mom says it would ruin everything if people knew the truth." I watched her curl up on her bed, clutching an old photo of us from before the fire. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but a larger part knew she needed to feel this guilt. Sometimes healing can only begin with pain. I started noticing patterns in Father's business dealings, regular meetings that coincided with large, unexplained deposits in offshore accounts. Every financial report I could access showed subtle discrepancies, just enough to raise questions if anyone looked closely enough. I collected it all, encrypted it, stored it safely in cloud servers they didn't know existed. Not for revenge, I told myself, but for insurance. Yet, with each new piece of evidence, I felt something shifting inside me. The scared, chained girl was becoming something else, something stronger. Converting pain into power became my daily routine. By 16, my hidden investments had grown into a small fortune, carefully spread across digital currencies and offshore accounts. Mirrors of Father's own financial maze, but cleaner, untraceable. Each clink of the chain against the radiator became the sound of another transaction, another step toward freedom. They thought they were keeping me safe. They never realized they were teaching me everything I needed to know about power. Emma's engagement party was being planned upstairs. I could hear Mother on the phone with caterers, florists, event planners. Her perfect daughter was marrying into another perfect family, and the celebration had to be flawless. "No, we need white roses, not cream. And the tablecloths must be Egyptian cotton," she insisted, while below, I was finalizing the code that would eventually bring their world down. I hadn't planned for it to happen during the engagement party, but then I heard them talking late one night through the security cameras I'd hacked. "We need to end this boarding school story," Mother whispered to Father in their study. "People are asking too many questions. Maybe it's time for a tragic accident, a climbing mishap in the Alps." Father's sigh was heavy. "It would be cleaner. We could finally sell the house, move somewhere new with Emma and James." They were planning my death over brandy and cigars. That night, chained to my familiar radiator, I started the sequence I'd prepared for years. Every illegal transaction I'd documented, every tax fraud scheme I'd uncovered, every fake document about my boarding school, all of it began moving through the digital world. Anonymous tips to their investors, encrypted files to tax authorities, evidence to their social circle about their hidden daughter. Like dominoes falling in slow motion, I watched through my laptop as their perfect world began to crack. The first sign was subtle: Father's business partner calling in a panic about irregularities in their accounts. Then came the investors, starting to ask questions about discrepancies in the company books. Mother's friends began whispering about the mysterious daughter no one had ever seen. The foundations were crumbling, and they didn't even know why. Emma noticed first. She'd been spending more time in the basement lately, guilt finally outweighing fear. "Something's wrong with Dad," she told me, sitting just beyond my chain's reach. "He's drinking more, and Mom keeps crying on the phone." I watched her twist her massive engagement ring, a gift from their rapidly draining accounts. "Maybe we should tell someone about this," she gestured to my chains. But we both knew it was too late for her to play hero. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I never had to lie, never had to forge documents. Every piece of evidence was real, gathered patiently over years of being their secret shame. Their own words, their own documents, their own lies became the weapons that destroyed them. All I had to do was show the world what was already there. I remember the exact moment they realized they were falling. It was during a dinner party, one of their last. Through the security cameras, I watched Father receive a phone call that made his face go white. The SEC was investigating. Major investors were pulling out. Their carefully constructed world was collapsing. And the best part? It was all their own doing. I'd simply removed the curtain they'd hidden behind. That night, for the first time in years, they forgot to chain me. They were too busy making panicked phone calls, trying to save what couldn't be saved. I could have walked out then, but I stayed by my radiator, watching through my laptop as justice unfolded in lines of code and official investigations. Sometimes the strongest chains are the ones we choose to keep, waiting for the perfect moment to break them. The money they'd spent maintaining their perfect facade, the lies, the fake boarding school records, the bribes to keep questions at bay, all of it created a paper trail. As their world crumbled, mine rose from its ashes, built on the very lessons they'd taught me about power and control. Emma's engagement party turned out to be the longest chaining of my life. With relatives flying in from all over, Mother couldn't risk anyone stumbling upon her shameful secret. 3 days I spent by that radiator, listening to celebrations above, while their empire crumbled in secret. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their final perfect party would be their last hurrah, though they didn't know it yet. I heard Mother introducing Emma to distant relatives. "Our only daughter," she'd say proudly, the lie rolling off her tongue as easily as breathing. "We're so blessed." Above my head, champagne corks popped and crystal glasses clinked while I ran final checks on my trading algorithms. Their bank accounts were hemorrhaging money faster than Father's drunk friends could refill their glasses. The breaking point came during the engagement dinner. Through the basement vents, I heard Father giving his speech, voice thick with expensive scotch. "Family is everything," he declared. "There's nothing more important than protecting the ones you love." That's when my phone buzzed, a notification that the first set of documents had been received by their largest investors. The timing felt like poetry. Late that night, after most guests had left, I heard Mother and Father in their study through my hacked security feed. "We have to do something about Sarah," Mother said, her voice shaking. "People are asking questions. The boarding school story isn't holding up anymore." Father's response chilled me. "I know someone who can help make problems disappear permanently." One tragic accident in Switzerland. They were planning my death over the same glasses of wine they'd used to toast Emma's happiness hours earlier. I'd known they were ashamed of me, had accepted being their dirty secret, but this was different. As I sat there, the familiar weight of chains on my wrists, I pressed the final button on my laptop. Every encrypted file, every recorded conversation, every piece of evidence I'd gathered over years of imprisonment began its journey to carefully chosen recipients. Emma came down later that night, still in her party dress. "Sarah," she whispered, mascara streaked from crying. I heard them talking, about Switzerland, about accidents. She couldn't finish the sentence. "We have to tell someone. This isn't right. None of this was ever right." I looked at my sister, the golden child they'd shaped in their image, finally breaking free from their spell. "It's already done," I told her quietly, showing her my laptop screen. Her eyes widened as she saw the evidence spreading across the internet, their financial frauds, their lies, their years of keeping me chained like an animal. "I didn't do this for revenge," I explained as she sank to the floor, careful to stay just out of reach of my chains. "I did it for survival." The next 24 hours were chaos above my head. Phone calls, screaming matches, the sound of papers being shredded and bags being packed. Through my cameras, I watched Mother try to withdraw money from accounts that no longer existed. I saw Father calling in favors from friends who suddenly wouldn't answer. Their perfect world was shattering, and I watched it all from the same spot where they'd tried to hide their imperfect daughter. Emma came down one last time before she left. "I should have helped you," she said, tears falling. "I should have been braver." I looked at my beautiful sister, the one they'd given everything to, now standing in the ruins of their lies. "You can be brave now," I told her. "Tell the truth when they ask you. That's all I need you to do." She nodded, finally reaching out to touch my scarred hand. The same scars I'd gotten saving her life, the scars that had made me a prisoner in my own home. "I'll make this right," she promised. But we both knew some things can't be made right. They can only be survived. As she climbed the basement stairs for the last time, I felt no triumph, no joy, just a quiet certainty that justice sometimes comes on its own timeline. The unraveling happened faster than even I had anticipated. Within a week of Emma's engagement party, their carefully constructed facade cracked beyond repair. The first major blow came from their investors. Years of hidden financial irregularities suddenly weren't so hidden anymore. Anonymous tips, backed by concrete evidence, sent their company's stock plummeting. Father's business partners, the same ones who'd laughed at his jokes over expensive whiskey while I sat chained below, were the first to turn on him. Mother's social circle, always her pride and joy, imploded next. The whispers started small. Questions about the mysterious daughter in Switzerland who never came home for holidays, never appeared in family photos. Then came the leaked medical records showing no evidence of my supposed treatments abroad. The lack of any documentation from the prestigious boarding school I'd supposedly attended. Their lies, repeated for so many years, collapsed under the weight of simple truth. I watched it all through my network of security cameras, still playing my role as their basement secret even as I orchestrated their downfall. Mother took to drinking earlier and earlier, her perfect makeup smudged by midday. Father stopped coming home some nights, desperately trying to salvage business relationships that were already beyond saving. The house grew quiet. The constant stream of parties and social gatherings dried up as their friends distanced themselves one by one. Emma moved out amid the chaos, taking only her personal belongings and leaving her expensive engagement ring on the kitchen counter. Through my cameras, I watched her final confrontation with our parents. "You made me complicit," she screamed at them. "Every time I had to lie about my sister, every time I walked past that basement door, knowing she was chained up down there, you made me a monster just like you." Mother tried to grab her, to explain, but Emma pushed past her. "Don't contact me," she said from the doorway. "Either of you. I need to figure out who I am without your lies." The evidence I'd collected kept emerging, each revelation worse than the last. Father's offshore accounts were frozen. Mother's charitable foundation, built on embezzled funds, was investigated. Their friends, once so eager to believe the story of their daughter in Switzerland, now shared photos of the basement radiator on social media. The chains I'd worn became trending evidence of their cruelty. Their lawyers quit first, then their accountants. Even their housekeepers and gardeners stopped showing up, leaving the perfect house to slowly decay. I watched Mother try to maintain appearances, desperately cleaning empty rooms that no one would ever visit again. Father spent hours in his study, making calls that went unanswered, drinking himself into oblivion. The final blow came from their own social circle. Mrs. Henderson, Mother's closest friend for 20 years, went on record about all the inconsistencies she'd noticed. "The stories never quite added up," she told a local reporter. "Different boarding schools, changing conditions, vacations that never produced photos. We should have asked more questions." The article went viral, bringing scrutiny they couldn't deflect. I continued my charade, letting them chain me up during the increasingly rare visits from lawyers or financial advisors. But now I saw the shame in Father's eyes when he locked the padlock, the trembling in Mother's hands as she brought down my meals. They knew their world was ending, but they clung to their routine of hiding me like it was the last piece of control they had. Their desperation became palpable. Mother started talking about selling the house, moving somewhere where people didn't know them. Father mentioned contacts in countries without extradition treaties. But their options dwindled with each passing day as more evidence surfaced, more accounts were frozen, more former friends turned their backs. Through it all, I maintained my silence, playing the role they'd assigned me all those years ago, the silent, hidden daughter. But now I was hidden by choice, watching through cameras and computer screens as justice took its natural course. Sometimes the best revenge isn't action at all. It's simply letting truth have its day in the light. The day I bought their house in foreclosure was the day it all became real. My algorithms and investments had performed beyond expectations, turning years of patient learning into substantial wealth. I watched through security cameras as Father received the notification, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. Mother collapsed into her favorite armchair, the one she used to sit in while telling friends about her daughter's wonderful life in Switzerland. It was strange, purchasing the prison that had held me for so long. But as I submitted the winning bid through layers of shell companies, I felt no triumph, just a quiet sense of things coming full circle. The mansion they'd used to showcase their perfect life while hiding their scarred daughter in the basement would now become my fortress against them. I hired contractors to renovate, watching through cameras as mother and father were forced to give tours to people measuring rooms and discussing changes. They didn't know I could see their faces as strangers invaded their space, planning to tear down walls and rip up the floors that had muffled my cries. The basement was the first thing I had renovated. The radiator removed, the chains melted down, every trace of their cruelty erased. Emma called me during this time, her voice small and uncertain. "I saw the sale notice," she said. "I can't believe they lost everything." I didn't tell her that I was the buyer, that her childhood home would soon be mine. Some secrets are better kept, even in the name of truth. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I almost laughed. After all these years, she was finally asking the right question. The security system was my next priority. I had the entire house rewired, cameras upgraded, new locks installed on every door. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was turning their home into the fortress they'd always wanted, but this time to keep them out instead of keeping me in. The gates they'd used to protect their social status would now protect me from them. Mother tried to salvage what she could, hosting one final garden party before they had to leave. Through my cameras, I watched her handful of remaining friends pick at tiny sandwiches and make excuses to leave early. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes hanging loose on her frame. Father spent the entire party in his study, drinking and staring at photos from better days. The day they had to move out, I watched them pack through my surveillance system. Mother kept touching things, the banister, the kitchen counters, the window frames, like she was saying goodbye to each piece of her perfect life. Father moved mechanically, boxing up books and papers, his shoulders stooped under the weight of his failures. They left most of their furniture, too expensive to move to whatever small apartment they could now afford. I waited until they were gone before entering the house properly for the first time as its owner. The air still smelled of Mother's perfume, but the rooms felt different, larger, less threatening. I walked through each space, remembering the sounds of parties above my head, the laughter that never included me. In Father's study, I found a photo album they'd forgotten, filled with carefully curated family pictures. Emma at graduation, at dance recitals, at summer camps. Me, conspicuously absent except for a few pre-fire photos, back when I was still worthy of being seen. Standing in my new home, running my fingers over my scars in the same halls where I'd once been hidden away, I felt neither victory nor revenge. Instead, I felt something quieter, the steady peace of justice served through patience and truth. The cameras that had been my eyes were now my shields. The rooms that had echoed with lies were now filled with honest silence. I slept in the master bedroom that first night, in the same house but a world away from my spot by the basement radiator. Through the window, I could see the gates that had once kept me in, now standing ready to keep them out. Sometimes, I realized, justice looks like becoming the thing they feared, not their scarred, hidden daughter, but a force strong enough to reshape their world. Today's reign feels like closure as I watch them through my security monitors, standing at the gates they once controlled. Their expensive luggage is worn now, scuffed from months of moving between cheap hotels and distant relatives' spare rooms. Mother's perfect hair is graying at the temples, and Father's proud posture has crumbled like his empire. They've been standing there for 20 minutes, drenched to the bone, staring up at their former home. My finger hovers over the intercom button as the last decade plays through my mind. Every chain, every lie, every party spent listening to life happen above my head has led to this moment. Emma called earlier to warn me they were coming. "They've lost everything," she said, her voice thick with tears. "The last of their accounts was frozen yesterday. They have nowhere else to go." She didn't ask me to help them. She's learned better than that. But I heard the question in her silence. The security cameras show Mother pulling out her phone, probably to call me again. She's been leaving messages for weeks, each one more desperate than the last. "Darling, we know we made mistakes," she'll say, her voice breaking. "We thought we were protecting you. Please, just talk to us." Father never leaves messages. His shame, at least, is honest. Through the rain-streaked cameras, I watch Mother's makeup run down her cheeks. She's wearing the same Chanel suit she used to wear to charity functions, now faded and worn. Father keeps his distance from her just like he always did when she was less than perfect. Some habits, it seems, survive even total ruin. The last trust fund they'd hidden was drained last week. I'd known about it for years but left it as their final lifeline, curious to see how long they'd make it last. Not long, as it turned out. Their talent for burning through money remained even when it was in short supply. Now they stand at my gates with nothing left but designer luggage filled with remnants of their former life. I think about the basement, now converted into a state-of-the-art home office. The radiator that held my chains is gone, replaced by sleek computers that manage my investments. Sometimes late at night, I still hear phantom echoes of parties above my head, but they fade a little more each day. The scars on my wrists have faded too, though I doubt they'll ever disappear completely. Some marks are meant to be permanent, reminders of what we've survived. Mother raises her hand to the intercom, then lets it fall. Even now, she's struggling to face what they did, to acknowledge the daughter they kept chained in the dark. Father checks his phone, probably empty of messages. All his business contacts long gone. They've been standing in the rain for almost an hour now, their perfect clothes soaked through, their expensive shoes ruined. My finger still hovers over the intercom button. I could let them in. The house has plenty of rooms, most of them empty since I live alone. I could show them what their basement looks like now, let them see how their prison became my launching pad. I could tell them about the investments I made, the algorithms I created, all learned from years of eavesdropping on their business dealings through heating vents and security feeds. Instead, I pick up my phone and type out a text, the same words they used so many times. "I'm sorry, but I'm away at boarding school in Switzerland. Perhaps we can connect another time." I watch through the cameras as Mother's phone buzzes, as she reads the message through the rain. Father's shoulders slump even further as she shows him the screen. They stand there for a few more minutes, two broken people staring up at their lost paradise. Finally, Mother turns away first, dragging her designer luggage through puddles. Father follows, head down, defeated. The gates remain closed, the security system armed, the cameras recording their retreat. I lean back in my chair, running my fingers over my scars, not from the fire, but from years of chains. Outside, the rain continues to fall, washing away the last traces of their presence. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge or triumph. Sometimes it's just about closing the gates and letting the past fade away in the rain.